Thank you very much, Alison, and good morning to everyone. It's a delight to be here chairing this very important conference, and I'm looking forward to chairing the session and many of our contributors and their speeches. Welcome to this, our first virtual conference. Moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to say a couple of things about the comments that Alison has just made, particularly how we're going to be sharing the learning from the last 12 months across the tech sector and our response to the pandemic. And we will hear particularly from Alison about how that has played out in terms of our work with ADAS and others over the last year. And today also, we will be spending some time looking at the details of that model, how proactive and preventative care can be made a reality through technology and through service redesign. So I'm really looking forward later on to welcoming Lord Bethell, the Health Minister, and I'll be introducing him in a few minutes. If I can go on to my next slide, please. Thank you. Just in preparing for today, I was reflecting a little bit on the journey that the Technology-Enabled Care Services Association has been on over the last 5 years or so, and how the sector has changed and how we as an organisation have changed. And particularly when it comes to starting out 5 years ago, making a really, I think, critical case for putting people at the centre of the approach the TSA was going to take, and how we needed to make sure that the digital switch that is now well underway and will be accelerating over the next few years has to be well managed in terms of making sure that people are kept safe who rely upon technology-enabled care, and also how we make sure that we recognise the value of data, but not just the value of lots of data, but the insight that one can gain from it, how we work with workforces, and how we take a population approach to the way in which we deliver technology-enabled care, and the leadership work that we published back in 2019 at our last conference being part of that. And then finally, as you've heard already from Alison, the work that the TSA has launched and undertaken over the last 12 months with the sponsorship of the Department of Health and Social Care to support the sector, to navigate through the first wave of the pandemic and be as resilient as it possibly could. And I think that journey that we have made over the last 5 years has seen us very much move from the margins to being a central part of the debate of how we reform social care and our role in the reform of health and social care more generally. Moving on to the next slide. And I think the first thing I wanted to say in our work with the Department of Health and Social Care and the sector right at the start of the pandemic, our bottom line was absolutely clear. It was that we had to keep people safe, and that for many people, we realised that they were really dependent and saw as a vital lifeline their technology-enabled care, their core services and so on, and that was a critical buffer for them, particularly during that first lockdown, and I think increasingly during the second lockdown, against social isolation. Next slide. But there is more than that. We began to see the evidence of providers adopting a more proactive and preventative approach, and this slide is one that regular attenders at our conference will have seen before, but it is still as powerful as ever, making the case for the contribution that technology in redesigned services can play in supporting that slowing of the progression of need. Next slide. And of course, that shift of focus to prevention in both health and care is born of a recognition that the population's health is much more than just treating their ill health. It's also about maintaining their health and well-being and tackling the causes of ill health. And as this slide shows, over half of the health impact that people experience during their lives, their health status, is the product of social and economic and environmental factors. Next slide. And this slide just makes the point that just a couple of weeks ago, my colleague, in fact, the Department of Health published its white paper setting out its proposals for the reform of health and social care, particularly integration. And we'll hear more about that during this conference. And Sir David Pearson, my colleague, will be talking more about that also tomorrow. But I think the key thing here is that in England, the government and the National Health Service have set out these 4 clear purposes of working in an integrated way, working as a system. And the tech sector has an opportunity to be part of that, be part of the solution and on the agenda that the government is setting out. Next slide. And this, because of this shift that I've been talking about, we I think we'll see a growing emphasis on how we use and share an abundance of data to become more insight rich, and how we equip the workforce to work differently with that data and with technology to deliver the right care at the right time. And that greater emphasis on prevention, self-care, social care and community services being a key part of that shift from an institutional focus to a population lens. Next slide. And here again, just emphasising something that I think is very clear from the government's white paper is the two types of integration that the government talks about. The importance, obviously, of integration within the NHS between physical and mental health services, between primary, community and secondary health services, but also the importance of integration between the NHS and local government and other services. And as we've heard from Alison already today, we will be, during the course of our conference over the next few days, focusing on the role that housing plays and other partners as well. And we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please. And again, from the white paper, something that I was really struck by as I read it just a couple of weeks ago was the government describing, along with the NHS, 5 characteristics, if you will, of what a high-performing local health and care system will do at a place-based or local and neighbourhood level, working across primary, community and secondary care and with partners in local government as well. And if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to draw out the key words from this set of 5 things. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. And I pick out those words because those words have been at the heart of what we have talked about and what we have campaigned for as the Technology Enabled Care Services Association, what we have advocated for, and what increasingly we see the opportunity to make a reality. The idea of being able to provide good advice to help people stay well, to maintain their health, a more preventative, joined up and citizen-focused approach that is proactive is at the core of the agenda that we can now really align ourselves with over the coming years. Next slide, please. And all of that echoes the vision that the TSA has had now for some years, but I think re-emphasised in our recent business plan. And that is that we are all about people choosing technology-enabled care to enrich their everyday lives. And that part of our mission to achieve that is that we drive transformation in this, our technology-enabled care industry. Next slide, please. And I think in the business plan that we set out earlier this year, the collaboration with the Department of Health and Social Care, with NHS and many others, we've set out in a very clear way how we will play our part as an organisation in this sector, as the voice of authority on technology-enabled care, as the technology-enabled care knowledge hub, and as a professional body setting the right standards and making sure that quality is always a forethought, not an afterthought, in the way in which we deliver our services. Next slide, please. And of course, critical to that is our workforce, the wider workforce, not just the technology-enabled care workforce, but everyone who works in health, care and housing. And we will be saying more about that during the course of this week in terms of the role that we can be playing to support the development and training of that workforce to be better equipped to make the very, very best use of technology. Next slide, please. And then the key thing I wanted to mention here is the critical role the TSA sees of working in partnership. And we have built and strengthened partnerships over the last year or more to make sure that we have a shared agenda, working with ADAS, as Alison has already described, and with NHSX and with the department. And we'll be saying more about that as this week proceeds. And on to my final slide. And really just to conclude, by saying that I think there are 3 things I hope that we will remember during this week, and they are these. When it comes to technology, that we are talking about it as being part of everyday life, that we are talking about the focus being on the person, not the tech, not being dazzled by the kit, but being focused on the outcomes it delivers for the individual and their quality of life. And thirdly, that this is about enabling people to lead the life they want, and that's the critical role that we believe good, well-deployed technology-enabled care in a proactive and preventative way can really contribute. So I'm now really pleased to be able to move us on to our keynote speaker for today. I'm delighted to introduce the Minister for Innovation, Lord Bethell, who I know is waiting in the wings to address us. So you're very welcome, Lord Bethel. Looking forward to what you have to say.